If you're interested, I see a lot of people share screenshots of Bible Hub and Blue Letter Bible and stuff like that, which gives you the pretty standard Strong's stuff. But if you're interested in something a little heavier, Accordance Bible Software is, in my opinion, the best for looking at primary texts. Logos Bible Software is another one. But anyway, so what I've got up here is on the right, the Hebrew. I've got the Septuagint translation, and then we've got the New English translation. And on the far left, I've got the NRSV up here. And so the word I want to look at, can you see the highlight where the cursor is turning things blue? Okay, on the right, you've got v'shulav, and this word shul is translated hem in the NRSV. It's train in the KJV. I think the hem of his robe filled the temple there in the NET. But this word really means something like the hanger downs, the hanging part. And I've opened up the Hebrew and Aramaic lexicon of the Old Testament so you can see how it is defined there. At the up at the top, seam, edge, lower edge of a vessel, so on and so forth. So it can refer to the seams, and that's where we see this word used a lot in the description of the tabernacle in Exodus. Sense number 2, the pubic region, and this is primarily used in reference to women who have their that part exposed as a means of shaming someone. And then number 3, seams or lower part of the body, and here it can refer to the butt and other things like that. So or the glutes, as I learned to call them when I was getting licensed as a massage therapist. But anyway, so when we look at this word in Hebrew, we've got to make a decision. This is not clear. We got to make a decision what's going on here. And hem is one possibility, but also the idea of his genitals, the hanger downs, the hanging parts. And so there have been arguments back and forth among scholars for what we should give preference to here. But I kind of like the argument that has been made that the author is intentionally playing with ambiguity here, because the idea of a hem being so large that it's filling the temple doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And I agree with Francesca and others who say that there is a sense in which this is a reference to the divine manhood. And
can we I'm going to pop us back and forth. Let me know when you want me to bring up the image that you're showing of the text. And I'm just going to come back to me and you so people can have an enjoyment in the video as well. And that is like, why would this is like a fundamental question behind. I've noticed with the other academic who was, one of them wrote an article. Kip Davis is actually bringing a death blow to that article. It's going to be amazing. I can't wait. But the idea is that they want to divorce this deity from the rest of the ancient Near East. And they don't want it to walk like a duck and talk like a duck and be a duck. They don't want their God to be that. And that's my personal opinion is you see that precept come out where they're like, no, our God is different. Just like I see Christianity is radically different from the Greco-Roman world in which it arrives. And I'm not saying there aren't unique things about it. But if you looked at any and every divinity and every narrative, there's something unique about it. So, so the question is, why would someone like you or Francesca or any of you academics, and notice I'm putting you all in a category here, why would you think this could be God's private parts? I mean, what would make your unclean mind come to such a conclusion?
Well, a lot of it, look, we're looking back about maybe around 2,700 years into the past. Right. And when we look back, we do not have a pristine, unadulterated, unobscured view of what they were saying, what they were thinking. We're looking back through thousands of years of interpretive lenses that have been brought to this text, ways it has been interpreted. And I've made a big deal a number of times, and sometimes people give me a hard time for it, of saying that texts don't have any inherent meaning. The meaning must be provided by the mind of a reader, a viewer, a hearer. And we can only reconstruct meaning to the degree we have experience with something. And so sometimes, people will be like, well, I'm able to guess what the meaning of a word is in some places. Yes, that's because you're bringing the context and you're bringing a bunch of other experience to bear on how you're interpreting this. But the reality is there is no meaning anywhere except in the minds of hearers, readers, viewers. And so these texts, we are reconstructing the meaning. And for folks who have a commitment to a certain perspective about deity, that perspective is going to govern how they are going to reconstruct that meaning. But when we try to divest ourselves of those commitments and ask, how would they have reconstructed it anciently? If you try to travel back there and say, just using whatever data that we can reconstruct from this time period, what does this tell us about how they would have viewed deity? You do not get an incorporeal deity. There are scholars who have published arguments that the idea of incorporeality, immateriality, is something that was given to Greco-Roman period Judaism and Christianity from Greco-Roman philosophical thinkers. And so you have there are some wonderful papers that have been published on how the idea of God having a body was still mainstream within early Judaism and Christianity. Within Christianity until about the 4th century CE. Within Judaism until about the medieval period. Maimonides is probably the one who most widely popularized the immateriality of God. And up until that point, most people just assumed God had a body. And so when we try to get around these interpretive lenses that have been given to us by the received tradition, what we see is that, as you said, this deity is another Canaanite deity. And the things that make Adonai distinct are not these revolutionary ideas, but incremental elaborations on stereotypical ideas. And if I may, there was a question that was asked earlier by Gnostic Informant.
Yeah, do you want to let me pop it up?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
We're sneaking ahead to the Q&A here, but it's okay if you feel if that's what I want you to do what you think is best. But how would you explain the evolution of Yahweh from a Canaanite god with a physical body into being outside space and time, and why?
So there are a handful of things that go into this. As God is kind of confronting the other gods of the nations in the Iron Age period, Israel is mainly dealing with the other territorial states around them. And so they're presenting their deity as on a par with these other deities. And there are some military forays into other nations. And sometimes Adonai wins, and that's what we have in Exodus. And sometimes Adonai loses, which is what we have in 2 Kings 3:27, where Adonai gets out of pocket, tries to return Moab to vassalage, and Chemosh smacks him down, and they've got to retreat back to Israel. And so you basically have this competition among equals. Once Jerusalem is destroyed and the Judahites are exiled, we now have a different problem to deal with. One, we got to figure out how we're going to access our deity, even though we're exiled in another country. And two, we've got to figure out a way to make sure everybody is still committed to Adonai, even though we are surrounded by all these other deities who are more accessible because there are a lot more divine images and who are more powerful. And so there's a rhetorical one-upmanship going on, where you got to say, oh, that deity is, so large, my deity is larger. That deity is so powerful, my deity is more powerful. And you keep one-upping everyone, and you get to a point where within Deutero-Isaiah and later literature, where God is, the earth is their throne and the heaven is their footstool. That's how gigantic they are. And then you get to this point where everything becomes a superlative. They are the biggest thing ever. They are the smartest thing ever. And this aids in people kind of reasoning about how it is that all these things can happen, and how it is that God can know all these things, and how it is God can help them through all of these trials. And so it's basically the trying to keep up with the circumstances and trying to present a deity that is capable of doing any possible thing that is ever needed. And ultimately you get to, oh, well, this deity's omnipotent. This deity is omniscient. This deity is omnipresent. Mm-hmm. And you get to that rhetorical statement before you have a rationalization for it, before you can explain it. And this is what I argue is the life cycle of a lot of religious dogmas. Religious dogmas are born of rhetorical need and rhetorical necessity. And then after they're born, you've got to go back and construct the rationale for it. And so the rationales, the explanations, the reasoning is pretty much always secondary. You arrive at the conclusion, and then you go back and retcon how it is that this can be. And so you have, once you get into the Greco-Roman period and you get the influence from these thinkers, materiality the flesh, matter, this is all base. This is all subordinate. This is low. Deities are spiritual, immaterial. That is what makes them higher. And so once you get into the 3rd and 4th century in Christianity, apologists are trying to make the gospel more palatable for the Greco-Roman intelligentsia. They got to go, okay, you know what? Our deity is the same.
Yeah. Right.
And then you reason all of that. And so it is a deity who starts off as one among many others. And I believe it's the 2nd chapter of my book, 2nd or 3rd chapter. Okay, so chapter 1 is what is a deity. Chapter 2, encountering divine. No, it's chapters 3 and 4, deity in the Hebrew Bible. And then chapter 4 is Adonai in the Hebrew Bible. And so I say, when we look in the Hebrew Bible, here is how deity is conceptualized. And it's very, very close to how the broader Southwest Asian world conceptualizes deity. Chapter 4 is Adonai in the Hebrew Bible. And I show that Adonai tags every single base of a prototypical deity. And what sets Adonai apart is not these revolutionary things that are unlike any other deity that has ever come before. What they are responses to circumstances that require we nudge this a little further ahead, and we twist this a little, and we bop this, and we do, and we are responding to these circumstances. And so Adonai is incrementally elaborated on in response to these changing circumstances until they become omnipotent, omniscient, omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, and immaterial. So this is a philosophical construct that takes centuries to really get fleshed out.